Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. You know the drill if you've been here before. I'm going to put the slides in our chat box so you can grab those slides and follow along today. It's just me. I don't have a guest presenter today. I didn't have anybody that knew the final two tools on my list that I wanted to cover, so I get to do them, which is kind of fun. This section, we're going to talk about audio, digital storytelling with audio, specifically using a tool called StoryCorps. And that's the plan today. We're going to talk about finding your roots, and I'm going to show you a clip from the new series that I think is pretty compelling and gives us some things to think about. Then we'll talk a bit about capturing audio, and I'll invite anyone here to share about trials and successes in recording audio in noisy classrooms, and we'll go through some tips and tricks in that one. And then I'm going to show you the StoryCorps resources and how to find them, and hopefully you'll be inspired to use them in some way or another. And then as always, I'll touch on those partner resources. So remember at the very beginning, and this is kind of just a pathway to what I hoped would happen, was that we would first talk about finding your roots and kind of watch what happens when a celebrity gets to dive into their own family research, some of the cool discoveries that they make, and we can really witness them connecting with history in a way that they wouldn't have otherwise. We hope that that leads to someone teaching students or conducting a family research project in the classroom at some point during the school year, talking about traditions or untold stories or interview skills. Sometimes when kids are learning to interview someone, it's most comfortable to interview a family member or someone they're close to that they have a relationship with. And it's good practice if they were to go out and interview a stranger. So this is a good place to start. And then we'd want to interpret those stories using some kind of a digital platform. And this series, we've shared a lot of things for capturing video and visual stories. And on this one, we're going to talk specifically about the audio and some resources for using audio. Turn off that email so it stops making the bing bong sound. So hopefully give me a thumbs up if at some point during this series, you felt inspired to watch Finding Your Roots. So you can either do this or give me the thumbs up emoji if you tuned in on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Or you streamed on PBS Passport, or you jumped on to PBS Learning Media and watched some of the clips there. So remember, okay, good. That was kind of what the hope was, that at the very least, we'd get some more viewers for Finding Your Roots. It's definitely become something I've really enjoyed doing in preparation for these workshops, is kind of putting on my headphones and having my lunch and watching an episode and kind of getting sucked in by the story. I've learned a lot. And reminded myself about a lot of periods in history that I really hadn't thought about in a long time. So got some thumbs up in the chat box, and some of them are getting there. So good. Okay, daughters have. Good, Jeanette. So the clip I want to show today features Melissa and Villaseñor, I think is how to say her last name. And she's an actress on Saturday Night Live. She's one of my favorites. And she's learning about her Mexican heritage, just like she's on the same episode as Mario Lopez, the one that we showed last week. And I just thought I'd give you some things to watch for as we watch this clip today. Watch how her emotions change as she's learning the story. And then pay attention to how the host, Henry Louis Gates, supports her in those changing emotions. And it's something that I think about when we're teaching kids to interview people, being empathetic or being ready for emotions that could bubble up during these interviews. And I remember what it made me think about, I'll just say that right now. I had to do a research project in high school where I had to go to a senior center and interview a woman who I didn't know. And I just called and said, I need to interview someone that lived through, I think it was the Great Depression at that time. And I went and interviewed her. And what I wasn't prepared for was that she would become very emotional and start to cry while I was interviewing her. I had no idea. I mean, I was 16 years old. I had no idea how to deal with her emotions. I wasn't ready for them. I didn't expect her to start crying during that interview. And I know I did a very poor job. I think I sort of like ended everything and left quickly, and it was really awkward. And so this made me think of how we might set students up for those same kinds of things that could happen, and what kinds of ways that they could learn as interviewers to really conduct a good interview.
We'd already traced Melissa Villaseñor's paternal roots back to her great-grandmother, Mercedes, who spent decades crisscrossing the border between the United States and Mexico, enduring tumult and tragedy. Now, following another line of her father's family, we came to an ancestor who made a very different kind of journey. The story concerns Diego Ochoa Garibay, a man who died around the year 1620 in Zamora, a city in western Mexico. You have never heard of this guy?
No.
You just met your 12th great-grandfather. Your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. Did you ever in your wildest dreams think we could go back this far?
No.
And,
No.
and look at that map on your left. That is Zamora. Melissa, your roots there go back at least 392 years.
This is amazing.
According to records held by the Catholic Church in Zamora, Melissa's 12th great-grandfather, Diego, came from a family of low-level nobility, a family that originally hailed from what was known as the Lordship of Biscay, which is now part of the Basque region of Spain.
Basque country.
Yeah, that is where your Spanish ancestors. I mean, have you ever wondered where in Spain
Yeah.
you came from? That's where you come from.
Vizcaya.
Yep.
I'm Basque, baby. I want to shout it from the mountaintops.
Well, there are a lot of mountains up there, too, to shout from.
That's so cool.
We know nothing about the circumstances of Diego's birth, but we have a very good idea of how he ended up in Zamora. Just as we'd seen on Mario's family tree, Melissa's ancestor came to conquer. Records place him in western Mexico around the year 1570. At the time, of course, the land belonged to its indigenous owners, but their numbers were dropping precipitously as the Spanish engaged in what they called pacification, a polite term for genocidal war. It's estimated that over 6 million native people were living in Mexico in 1545. But by 1570, more than half of them would be dead. So that's what pacification meant. Brutal warfare against the Native Americans.
Now I feel bad.
Guilt is not heritable. What your ancestors did is not on you, but it's important to find out what they did.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
There, would you please turn the page?
Yes.
All right. So, so the big questions I had was watching for emotions. What kind of emotions did you see Melissa go through? How did they change? Yeah, excitement to guilt and sadness. Excitement to dread. She was excited to find out where she came from, but then sad to find out about the killing. Okay. Yeah. Excitement about where she was from. I'm from Basque, baby. Right. And then there was like, oh, that's not the best way to end that story. Right. And then and I thought this was significant. How did Henry Louis Gates support her as she made those final discoveries? What did he say that I thought was interesting? Yep. Guilt is not heritable. It's important to know what they did, but you don't have to take that guilt on. And yeah, I really love that too. It's not your fault. And I think a lot of people, as we dig into our past and we see some things that maybe we wouldn't be proud of, especially with things like this or slave owners in our past. I think a lot of us probably can trace back to ancestors that owned slaves. And it's really easy to feel like you should assume that guilt, but it doesn't reflect on her. So I thought that was a really interesting clip. That was from the episode that aired on Tuesday, February 1st, called Mexican Roots. And like I said before, she was on there with Mario Lopez, and both were looking at their Mexican-American heritage and the things that, what their families were like. So you can still stream that on PBS Passport if you have access to that and you want to watch that full episode. So let's move on to talking about audio. And as I said, first, I want to talk about we've already talked about tools that you can use to do digital storytelling with audio. The cool thing is iMovie, WeVideo, Adobe Creative Cloud, all ones that we've covered in this series, can all be used to record and edit and publish audio. And so if you remember back, I think in those sessions, you might have to go in and watch those recordings again, especially when Anne did iMovie. She talked about how when you record a video, you can click on that clip and separate the audio from the video. You can delete the video, and then you've just got that audio file that you can play with. And it's a similar process in WeVideo. I've added GarageBand and Soundtrap because those are both tools. We're not going to talk about those today, but if you're looking for tools for using audio, you can use those too. And then this one I've used on my phone when I was teaching, and it's called Voice Record Pro, and it was free. And it was a very simple, those are the screenshots there where you hit record and it records whatever the audio is, and then has all these places that you can share it, one of them being to Google Drive. And so how I used this when I was teaching is I had a colleague who visited my classroom every Thursday to do songs and singing with my K1 class. And they were always songs about science that he had wrote, original songs. And he would give me the typed out transcript of the song, and then he would sing the song with the kids. And I would record him singing with the kids and then create a QR code link to the audio. And at the listening center, the kids could listen to the recording of us singing with him and follow along in the printed words. So that was this very basic way I used this. I also used it to record audio books. So I asked people on staff to come in and choose a picture book from our library and record themselves reading it. I even gave them a little bell to ring for page turning, and then made QR codes and stuck them on our books. And then the kids could scan those codes and listen to the audio recorded by someone in our class. So kind of some fun ways to use audio. I worked with a class in Three Forks where the fourth graders used that app to record audio for younger kids and read the books to younger kids and create audio books for the younger kids. So really easy to use and free on that one. When it comes to capturing audio, a little bit of gear goes a long way. And so I've given you a couple resources. I found this blog post, and it's here in the notes section, about how to record in a noisy classroom. Has some good tips and tricks, and not just audio, but video too. I think nothing was more sad than a kindergartner who had worked really, really hard on a video in my class, only for them to listen to it later and realize that the background noise had just completely drowned out their little voice. And about the fourth or fifth time that happened, we realized we needed to start troubleshooting some better recording options. And so some of those things, having a microphone makes a big difference. And so, like I said, this one that I'm giving away, these are pretty cheap. They're like $15. And they plug into whatever device you're using in through the headphone jack. So if you're on an iPad, or if you're on a phone, or if you're on a Chromebook, it should work that way. I've also put a link in the notes to Tony Vincent's website, and he's kind of a edupreneur. He's very active on social media, but he does a lot of video things. And this infographic right here is a Google drawing of his whole production setup. And then the numbers here indicate what it is, and then they're linked to how to buy them on Amazon. And so I've used this to buy, I've got these lavalier mics, these Movo mics. They were maybe $80. I've purchased the ring lights before to give away in these things, the iPad stand right here that he's got for a teleprompter. All of these things were things he's acquired on Amazon. If you have parent group money, or you've written a grant, or you want to do a Donors Choose project to do some more production work in your classroom, this is a great place to just get a good list of any kind of sound or any kind of equipment that you might want to use. And you just kind of click on what it is. So like this is like a selfie stick really, but it holds a phone in it, and you click on it and it takes you to that link on Amazon for how to purchase it. And he does get a little bit of a kickback because he's advertising for Amazon on this site. But his site is, I would really recommend it. He has some other gear he recommends, like a presentation remote, and he recommends the ring light and the green screen, the pull down green screen, which I think is brilliant. So it's good to check out if you're looking to acquire any kind of production gear that you might want to continue these kinds of projects. And so the other piece is creating some kind of a sound booth for recording. And so a couple of examples, this is like a box that they have a microphone set up in, and you can see where he's got the computer inside the box. And all that does is just keep the sound into that one space. And I've seen teachers with like milk cartons or milk crates, and then they put eggshell mattresses on the outside, anything to absorb the sound. This larger version is actually from my classroom a bunch of years ago. And it was a sound booth made of plywood with eggshell mattress glued to the outside, and then hinges on the plywood so we could open the door. It just sat in the corner of our room. And that's the student in there. And we had a little ledge that they could put their iPad on so that their hands weren't touching the microphone, and they could record their audio that way. This was a project. I had a friend who taught high school physics, and her students were doing project-based learning, and I presented this problem of this noisy classroom making our videos hard to hear. And so she enlisted one of her students to make creating the sound booth her physics project. So this student researched sound booth technology and what would be needed. She interacted with my kids and measured, we sent her measurements of the space that we would use it. And we took a measurement of, the average height of the kid and how much room they would need in there. And then my kids kind of designed what they thought it could look like and sent the ideas on. And then what came to us was basically this box that I put children in, which looked really strange to an outsider. But it was a very simple structure, and it worked beautifully in that it did capture the sound. The sound went directly into the device. And while you could kind of hear what was happening in the rest of the room, the audio that they recorded was really, really good. So I ended up having to, when I left the school and took this position, I didn't know what to do with the sound booth. I couldn't find anybody who wanted it. So I think it's still in our storage unit, or my husband might have thrown it away without telling me, but it is a very simple process. The other thing we did was we identified quiet corners in our classroom. We had kids go and face the wall with their back to the rest of the class and try and do their audio in that way. We also had like designated recording times where everybody was silent, either working on a reading or writing project, and the kids took turns just going and recording their things so that we could have a silent space. So all of that is in this blog post on how to record in a noisy classroom. And then with a few other tips that I had. I know there are others on here that have recorded audio. I'm kind of looking at Sarah Rainey. Do you have any ideas or things that you've done to capture audio without sound being a problem?
Yeah. So forgive me first, I've caught the crud.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So when Flipgrid first came out and was super popular, they had these like pop-up little tiny flip tents or flip huts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got a bunch of them. They were like $20, and it's really small, but you can go in there because a lot of middle school kids, don't like their faces to show and are embarrassed by their peers watching them. But they worked out really well for sound too, so that they could put a chair in there and just have their computer in there with them, and with a microphone, it didn't pick up on the outside noise.
Mhm. Yeah, I've seen those online too, and they look like they were green too, right? So they could use the green screen features as well.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. And it's crazy that that just small, thin fabric was enough to be a barrier.
For sure. Those are my favorite.
And I've seen those little tents actually at like pet stores too. My mother-in-law sent us like a pet tent once, and I think it's the same idea. So anybody else have audio tips or tricks or things that you've done with your students to capture video and audio, to kind of troubleshoot that noise? Feel free to throw that in the chat box, and we'll read that. I'll move on to StoryCorps right now and just start to describe what this is. First of all, has anybody heard of or used StoryCorps? If you want to do a thumbs up if you have, even if you just heard of it. This is kind of a new one to me when I first started working for PBS, and I wished I had knew about it when I was teaching. Melissa's read some on it. Okay. I'm gonna optimize for video again, just so that you can watch this video. I go away, but you can see this video. This does a really nice job of describing StoryCorps and what it is about.
I just start by asking you one of the questions on my list, right?
Anything you want.
Okay. So what were you like as a kid?
I was pretty weird. I didn't want to do anything but watch TV. And I spent a lot of time by myself. But I always liked talking to older people, like the waitress at the luncheonette near my house or my grandparents. I remember when I was just a few years older than you, your great-grandpa Abe and your great-grandma Rose and her sisters came over to our apartment for Thanksgiving. After dinner, I found this tape recorder lying around, and somehow I got the idea to interview them. I didn't have a clue what I was doing, but I recorded their voices and stories, and I saw how much they loved being listened to. A few years later, your great-grandpa and your great-grandma and all her sisters passed away. But I remembered I'd made that tape, so I went looking for it, but I couldn't find it. Even now, when I go to your grandma's house, I go looking for that tape, just hoping it's going to turn up.
I don't get it. Why do you keep looking for it?
Because it would make me so happy to hear those voices again, and I'd love to play that tape for you. You know, doing that recording really taught me something. You can find the most amazing stories from regular people. All you have to do is ask them about their lives and listen.
Really? That's it?
Yeah, it's simple. We can learn so much about the people all around us, even about the people we already know, just by taking the time to have a conversation. And if you pay just a little attention, you'll find wisdom and poetry in their words.
Do people really want you to ask about their lives?
Yeah, they do. Most people love to be listened to because it tells them how much their lives matter. All you need to ask are questions like, who is the most important person in your life? Or what are you proudest of? Really, listening closely is simple. When you're curious, treat people with respect, and have just a little courage to ask the important questions, great things are going to happen.
So the concept of StoryCorps is that at one time, this movement was they set up recording booths in public places, and they invited people to come and have conversations that would be recorded. And then the audio from these conversations was recorded to the Library of Congress so that anyone who logged into the website could listen to those stories, and they become part of a very rich oral history. And it was a movement that grew it so much so they partnered with radio stations and with other places to get the StoryCorps people out on the road, setting up these listening booths and really encouraging people to just come together and share stories so that they could record it to the Library of Congress. It's grown now so that it's not just this sort of traveling roadshow that you have, it has to come up to your town in order to participate. Now it's grown into a movement that anyone can participate from anywhere. And so I'll show these resources, how to find things first. And this is one of those topics that there's so much out there, and they've got a lot of different things for a lot of different audiences that it can get overwhelming to figure out, well, how will I use this and what would this look like for me? So on this slide, I've tried to put things in order of how you might approach using StoryCorps with your students. And you'll see there are a lot of options. And whether or not you go through from start to finish and making sure these audio stories end up at the Library of Congress, may or may not be important to you, but I think they've created some really amazing lesson ideas and interview questions and processes that are useful for teachers who would want to engage in this. So the first place to start, and I've linked this first place where it says stories, and it's just going to take us to the StoryCorps website. So it's just storycorps.org, and then I've come to the story place. And this is where you can find stories that average Americans from all over the country have recorded on various topics. And they're archived on this website in podcast form so that you can hear them. But it goes a little bit further. You can scroll through and just click on the tile and listen to one. But you can also search for all animations or podcasts. You can also search by location. So if you want to look for a specific state, like Montana, or collections about certain topics. So they've actually done projects where they went out asking for people to tell stories around different types of stories, love stories, military voices, things like that. And then, or you could search by year if you're trying to, if you're studying a certain period in time, you could go back and try and find the stories from that certain year. Now the animations are different, and there are not as many of them, but what we just watched was a version of those animated shorts. And that is, some of the stories have been repurposed into the audio is placed over top of some animation. And they've got what we saw, which was cartoon characters kind of acting out the story, which is a really cool visual element for the kiddos, especially for maybe our younger kids. And then they've also got them in more of a podcast. You can subscribe to the StoryCorps podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts, and hear the stories in that format too. So if you're looking for other options for listening to podcasts. Now, I think that this is a great place to start with having kids just listen to these kinds of conversations. I was just going to pick one and let you hear an example of the kinds of stories that these people record. And remember, it's just audio. So you're just going to hear what the audio sounds like. So I'm gonna just play this one.
Over 2021, the pandemic drove opioid abuse to a new high. During the heaviest months, more than 100,000 people died from overdoses. One of the hardest hit areas was Blue Creek, Ohio, where Jesus Valley and his wife Suzanne lived for 2 decades. In that time, they've taken in 6 children, all from families struggling with addiction, including their own.
We have told the children that their parents do love them, but they are not able to take care of them. So we stepped in I always like to tell everybody we raised yours, mine, ours, my brother's, now others. But I never dreamed in my wildest imagination that we would be in the situation we are today. Did you, Jesus?
No, I didn't. I thought we supposed to be by ourselves, traveling together.
But I don't know if we would be as happy without all these kids. Kids bring happiness.
Yeah, they do.
Do you remember when one of them said, "You mean to tell me you haven't adopted us yet, Aunt Sue? Why not?" And then we had our adoption party and we took them to that hotel and they went swimming. And the guy from the hotel said, "Is your parents here?" And he said, "No." And then he said, "Yes."
He said, yes, there's my dad.
You know, I'm 62 years old and I think about the seasons of life from 0 to 20. You're in the spring of life. From 20 to 40, it's summer. You're in the prime of life. 40 to 60, it's the fall of the year. And your body starts kind of falling apart.
Can we make that season a little longer?
It's unbelievable. Do you realize if we can live another 20 years, we'll be in our 80s? And I've worried about it a little bit.
But if we can encourage every kid to help each other, I don't think we have anything to worry about.
I look back over the years of our lives and we've struggled, but you always were right there by my side for those decisions to take on more children, to raise them. And you've really done that unselfishly, Jesus. You know, we get busy with life, and I don't say it enough. And I just want to say that to you.
Thank you. I never respect anybody that praise me for what I do. I love the kids, and things change, but I don't mind, because I think we did the right thing.
So if you can like imagine on last week on Friday while I'm preparing for this, I fell down the rabbit hole hard and listened to so many of these stories. And I just like tears going down my face. They are very, very touching. And again, it's just a conversation, but it's just beautiful. If you go to Montana, there are some that have been recorded here in Montana. And a lot of these were in partnership with Montana Public Radio up at our station in Missoula at U of M. And for a couple of years, they've had StoryCorps come and visit Missoula and set up their sound booth and gather those stories. And then they published them here, but also on the Montana Public Radio website as well. And they've even played them on the radio also. So you can find some Montana specific stories there. So, and please feel free to interrupt me if you have questions or you want to know anything. I'll keep moving along here, but feel free to interrupt. So that's the website, the StoryCorps website, and how you would find stories is, getting your start, trying to figure out what this might look like with your students. So then the next place you can go is on PBS Learning Media. There is a collection of StoryCorps resources specifically for teachers, and it's under the tag of The Great Thanksgiving Listen. So a few years ago, StoryCorps approached PBS about a partnership with this idea that when families come together for Thanksgiving, wouldn't that be a wonderful opportunity to conduct some of these conversations and record some of these conversations? Now, Thanksgiving is pretty far away, but Easter is coming up. So you could call it the Great Easter Listen if you wanted to follow the same idea. And really the concept is the same no matter which holiday you use as the backdrop. When the family's together, encourage young students to interview family members. So the collection is called the StoryCorps Great Thanksgiving Listen. And it has these resources in tiles, starting with the introduction video we just watched, and then the toolkit for educators. Now, I don't always love these like giant long PDFs of lesson plans. I always look at this site as more of a grab and go, just give me something quick to do. But I appreciated this toolkit because it really did have some nice lesson plans that you could go through, eyeball, how to conduct an interview, how to close, some lessons with great interviews, great questions, lists of questions. And I think that's a big one, is giving students things to ask so that the interview goes somewhere and tells an interesting story, and then gives you all of this information that you might be able to use. So it is a pretty nice, detailed, many pages in this PDF, 30 pages in this PDF. So they give you way more than you would need, but it does align them to our Common Core ELA standards. And then this I thought was cool. This is a Thanksgiving placemat that you would maybe print this and have them out at the table. And these little questions might start some conversations at the dinner table. So maybe we could get on Canva and make a different version of this and call it the Great Easter Listen or something, and use it at the dinner table to try and get these conversations to happen there. So from there, in this collection, so you could go through there, you read your teacher's guide, and then they've got the project overview here. So I'm going to show this video so you can kind of get a view of this project and the overview and the oral history. Now, I will also say they've tagged this grade 6 through 8, 9 through 12. Probably because they assume that the maturity of the kids and being able to conduct these interviews. But I actually had my daughter, when she was in 2nd grade, use the questions to do this with my grandma at Thanksgiving not too long ago. So here, let's listen to this video as kind of an overview. And again, tell me if you don't see or hear the video.
We can find wisdom and poetry all around us. All we have to do is listen. This Thanksgiving, StoryCorps invites you to honor and celebrate the stories of an entire generation of Americans. Together, we can create the largest collection of voices ever gathered in human history and preserve it at the Library of Congress forever. With StoryCorps' new app, you can record a meaningful interview with a grandparent or another elder. Ask simple questions like, what are you most grateful for? How do you want to be remembered? Then, listen. Truly listening to someone reminds them that their lives matter.
Is everyone else able to see? Some people said they just have a black screen. Maybe I'll stop. You can see it? Okay.
I can see it.
Okay. All right. I'll try it again. Not sure what's one.
And reminds us all of what matters most. We're calling this effort the Great Thanksgiving Listen. Help us make history. Download the app, spread the word.
All right, so that alludes to the other part of this cool project, which is there's an app. It's called the StoryCorps app, and it can be downloaded on Apple or on Google Play. So iPad, iPhone, I think probably in your Chromebook. And the app walks you through recording these things. And then at the end, it will automatically send it to the Library of Congress for an archive. And what I like about the app, and I'll show the video in just a minute, is that it has the questions embedded right in there. And so when my daughter did this with my grandma, she went through ahead of time and picked the questions she wanted to ask her. And then it prompted her, in case she got nervous, it prompted her with the questions. What we learned the hard way, which was kind of heartbreaking with that, was that she forgot to hit the record button. So she had the conversation, she gave the prompts, but we didn't actually get to record that conversation. So learn from our mistakes, make sure you touch the record button. But I'm going to show this so you can kind of see how the app works and how it might be something that you might be able to use.
We can find wisdom and poetry all around us. All we have to do is listen. StoryCorps invites you to help create the largest collection of voices ever gathered in human history and preserve it at the Library of Congress forever. With StoryCorps' app, you can record a meaningful interview with someone close to you. Ask simple questions like, what are you most grateful for? How do you want to be remembered? Then, listen. It's easy. All you have to do is follow these simple steps. Step 1. Get the StoryCorps app for your mobile device and create a free account. Step 2. Pick a partner. This can be anyone you'd like to get to know better. Choose interview questions from lists provided in the app or written by you, and find a quiet, comfortable place where you won't be interrupted. Step 3. Let the app guide the way. Follow the prompts to begin recording and let the conversation flow. Step 4. After the interview is over, take a selfie with your partner and add a title to help you keep track of your conversation. Add a summary, things like what did you talk about, where, and with whom. Finally, add keywords, simple words and phrases that make it easier for you to find your interview in our collection. Step 5. Choose the privacy setting that feels right, and make sure to publish your interview so it will be added to the StoryCorps archive and preserved at the Library of Congress. You can choose to share your story with the world or keep it private and share your file directly with family and friends. Listening is an act of love and respect. Listening to someone reminds them that their lives matter and reminds us all of what matters most. Help us make history. Download the app. Record your story.
So a few notes about the app. Students have to create an account before they can use it. And it is restricted to students over the age of 13. And so what we know about the data privacy agreement in Montana, I would definitely get it in front of your IT department before you attempted to use it. The other option you could do is if you wanted these things to happen at home, you can send the information home and encourage parents to download the app on their devices, and then they kind of assume all of that privacy stuff on their end at home and go through the process that way. Like I said, you can do this without the StoryCorps app. You could use the app that we ended up using it for accidentally, which was just to have the questions be a guide while she was talking to grandma. And you could use any other tool to record the audio. If you do want to go through and put it on the Library of Congress, there are steps to just upload it to the site on the site this way. So there's some notes about the app. There are limitations. I do find it to be, I struggled with it a bit on Friday. It just wasn't remembering my username and my login, and I was growing more and more frustrated as I was working on it. But so it's not perfect, and it's not one that I would necessarily insist that you use to do this project, but it is an option. And for families that feel tech savvy and comfortable, it might be a really great thing for them to do. Along the same lines as the app, they have what came about because of COVID, which is this idea of StoryCorps Connect, where you can go record an interview remotely through the browser. And so it prompts you to set up an account again. And then once your account is set up and you're logged in, it takes you through setting up an interview. It takes you through all of this. It's got a Connect toolkit. It's got your getting started questions, conversation tips, recording recommendations. It's got all of that there to support you and your students if this is something that you wanted to do. So again, I'm going to show the video on it because honestly, they're cute little videos. Explain it and describe it better than I ever could.
This is Dave Isay, founder of StoryCorps. To record your StoryCorps Connect interview, log into your StoryCorps account and follow these simple steps. Step 1, pick someone to honor with an interview and invite them to participate. Step 2, prepare questions using our great question list. Step 3, go to StoryCorpsConnect.org, click Record Your Story, and send the interview link to your partner. Step 4, click Start Recording Audio, ask your questions, and listen closely. Remember, you can't pause an interview. Step 5, when you're done interviewing, click Stop Recording. Discuss the privacy setting that feels right with your partner, then save your interview. Step 6, add a title and keywords to your interview. Step 7, archive your interview. Rest assured the audio and still photos from your interview have been saved. After they're processed, your interview will be preserved in the StoryCorps archive and at the Library of Congress, where it will become part of American history. Share your interview far and wide and know that someday, future generations will be listening.
So it's fairly easy there. And again, that came about when, we couldn't connect with people in person. So using video conferencing to do that and record the stories. And again, we have tools probably within our school where you could do this without their site. You could set up your Google Meet or your Zoom or whatever you wanted to do and record things that way. And that's another way to do this. So that's StoryCorps Connect. And then the last piece, and this is the part that I found a little less user-friendly. They do have an education section on their website, and the education section is created for teachers. If I were to give them any feedback, I would probably look at the organization a little bit more. They do have a newsletter you can sign up for, and they do have some training resources for how you might use this. And then they have some times who have participated in this. They can but the resources for educators actually look like courses. And that was the part I got a little lost. They're obviously free, but that's where you need to create the login, and then you can enroll in these courses about how you might do this storytelling in your classroom. And so it's kind of a DIY approach, and I think it takes you through kind of the steps of digital storytelling and setting kids up to be successful. So if you wanted to fall down that rabbit hole, you absolutely could, especially if you were looking at wanting to just build your skills around these ideas. So this is some of the courses they have available to explore, and some things that you could pursue with that StoryCorps. So those are all the resources about StoryCorps, and I try to just put them on that slide so that you could explore and kind of decide, how might I do this? What would this look like? I think the idea is simple. It's giving kids the opportunity to sit down and audio record a conversation with a family member and giving them some of those questions to get started. And then whether or not you upload it to the Library of Congress, that's really up to you. But using their materials and their tools to really help beef up those lessons. Now, because I showed you so many things between the Learning Media Collection and the Stories page, I'm going to give you some time to explore that and really encourage you to go through those resources, click on those links, listen to some stories, get some Kleenex, have it handy, and then think through, how might you use this with your students? Is there a potential for this to be something? Melissa, there are museums that set up StoryCorps listening centers in their spaces as well, and encourage patrons to come and record their stories at their museum site too. So you might dig around on the site and see if you see any resources for that as well. But I'll stop talking and I'll give you about 10 minutes to just explore all of these sites and all of these things and see how you might be able to incorporate this with your students, and let me know if you have questions.
I have a few English teachers that I'm working with on some end of the year things, and I think this would be really fun to try out with one of their classes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think it'd be a fun end of the year project too. And even taking the concept to student too,
Yeah, and I like how it has the questions there for them, because oftentimes those are things that they can't always, articulate, or they're not always good at, good questioning.
Right. I was just thinking, wouldn't it be cool if the tradition was when a teacher retired from the district, that we had somebody do a interview with them about all the things that they saw in their career as an educator and the changes from over the course of the many years they taught.
That's awesome. I also think Teacher Appreciation Week coming up soon, I saw a video about students being interviewed on why they come to school, the reason, or like the teacher that, makes them come to school, like it drives them to it. And I thought this would be a wonderful thing to try that out with too.
Yeah, I love those ideas today. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.